Usually when we sit down to look at political shakeups, we're talking about pretty standard stuff.
Right.
Maybe a bad poll number, a scandalous tweet, or someone resigning to, spend more time with their family.
Standard beltway drama.
Yeah.
Business as usual, the kind of stuff that cycles out of the news in 48 hours.
But the source material we are working with today,
Oh, yeah.
this is something else entirely.
Oh, yeah.
We are looking at a conversation from January 2026 involving Candace Owens and Baron Coleman. And frankly, it feels less like a political discussion and more like, I don't know, a crime thriller script someone left on a park bench.
It really does. It is dense, it is incredibly paranoid, and the stakes couldn't be higher. We are talking about their ongoing, real-time investigation into the death of Charlie Kirk in Orem, Utah.
And we have to be very clear about the language here right off the bat. Throughout this entire source, Owens and Coleman are not calling this an accident.
Oh.
They aren't calling it a tragedy. They are using one word over and over again: assassination.
That is the baseline for everything we're about to discuss. If you don't accept that premise, or at least if you don't accept that they believe that premise, the rest of this deep dive won't make sense.
Yeah, they're operating from the conviction that the official story is a lie. And the mission of this deep dive is really to just organize the absolute chaos they are presenting.
And it is chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, you have allegations of a massive internal purge at Turning Point USA, suspicious military intelligence connections, a fight over the family dynasty.
And a broader theory that the entire conservative movement has been hijacked by foreign interests.
It's a rabbit hole in every sense of the word. So I think we should start inside the building. Before we get to the death itself or the conspiracies, the source paints a picture of an organization, Turning Point USA, that is absolutely detonating from the inside.
Detonating feels like the right word because we aren't talking about a few people quitting in protest.
Yeah.
The source reports a massive purge of employees. We're talking 30 to 40 people fired in a single sweep.
Which is a huge percentage of staff for an organization that size. I mean, if you fire 40 people in a day, you're usually signaling that the company's going under.
Exactly. So what sparked this? Was it budget cuts? Did a grant fall through?
No, and this is where it gets, cinematic. According to the source, the catalyst wasn't money, it was paranoia. There was a frantic hunt for leaks.
Leaks of what?
Well, the story goes that Andrew Colvett, who's a key figure at TPUSA, the spokesperson, spotted a female employee's laptop. And on her screen, she had a screenshot of Candace Owens's show timeline.
Wait, pause. A timeline, like just a publicly available feed of what Candace was posting on X or Truth Social?
Exactly. Owens points out this was public information. She was tracking Charlie's location, which tons of people were doing online. But seeing that screenshot allegedly sent the leadership into a total spiral.
So they fired her?
Immediately. Fired this young woman on the spot.
For looking at a public timeline, that seems excessive.
Oh, it didn't stop there. They then proceeded to fire everyone she knew.
Everyone she knew.
Everyone she was friends with. If you had lunch with her in the break room, you're gone. It was a classic guilt by association sweep.
That just screams panic. I mean, if you are firing the receptionist because she had a salad with the girl who looked at a screenshot, that is an organization running on fear.
It creates a climate of terror, certainly. But Owens makes a really sharp management insight here that I think is worth unpacking. She calls it the APAX theory.
APAX. Help me out with that one.
It's essentially a theory of organizational bloat. Her argument is this. If you can fire 40 people from your staff in a single afternoon, just wipe them off the payroll, and the lights stay on.
The phones keep getting answered. The organization doesn't collapse.
Right. What does that say about your business model?
It says those 40 people weren't doing anything essential.
Precisely. It suggests massive financial mismanagement. It implies you had dozens of people in the payroll who were just redundant.
So Owens is using this purge to argue two things. One, the leadership is paranoid and lashing out. And two, they have been wasting donor money on a massive scale for years.
Exactly. A bloated, panicked organization. And the finger pointing in the source material is very specific. They claim the people currently running the show are making horrifically terrible decisions.
So who is actually steering the ship here?
The source suggests that while Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, is viewed as the ultimate authority, she's being advised, or maybe manipulated, by Tyler Boyer and Andrew Colvett.
And the examples of these bad decisions are telling, like sending cease and desist letters to YouTubers.
Right, this is regarding the drone footage. This seems to be a major sticking point in the investigation.
It is huge. Imagine you are an internet sleuth. You see reports of drones at the scene of the death.
Okay.
TPUSA security comes out initially and says there were no drones.
Yeah.
Then a week later, the lawyers send a letter saying, okay, there were drones, but they were for media purposes only, so stop talking about it.
You just poured gasoline on the fire. You basically just told the internet, we lied the first time, but believe us this time.
Exactly. By shifting the narrative from no drones to our drones, they just validated the conspiracy theorists. It makes it look like they are hiding something just because they can't get their story straight.
And speaking of stories that don't add up, we have to talk about the security.
Yeah.
Because if your boss gets assassinated, usually that means you failed at your job.
Yeah.
That's just the reality of executive protection.
You would think so. We need to talk about Dan Flood. He was the head of security, the man personally responsible for protecting Charlie Kirk.
And the source details that Charlie was killed by a .306 caliber, shot a high-powered rifle round.
That is a catastrophic failure of protection. In the corporate world or the military, anywhere, really, if your primary charge is killed on your watch, you are fired, period.
You might even be sued or investigated for negligence.
Okay.
But according to the source, they received a solid tip that not only was Dan Flood not fired, he was actually promoted. He's still there.
That doesn't make any sense, unless the failure was the point.
That is exactly where Owens goes with it. She suggests his role wasn't just simple protection, and this is where the source pivots to the dark military theory.
This is where the map gets really big and honestly pretty scary.
Yeah.
The Fort Huachuca connection, I've heard of this place. It's Army intelligence in Arizona, right?
Yes. It's heavily involved in signals intelligence, network enterprise, that sort of thing.
Right.
The source highlights a web of connections here.
So get this. Allegedly, Dan Flood's father ran intelligence operations at Fort Huachuca.
Okay, so a family history of intel.
And on top of that, Erica Kirk's mother reportedly held Department of Defense contracts related to that same specific area.
So you have the head of security and the widow's family both tied to this specific military intelligence hub.
Owens uses this to build an argument that we aren't looking at a random crime, but an operation. She is arguing that elements within the top brass of the military are involved in what she calls satanic psychological operations.
That is a heavy word, satanic. She's not using that metaphorically.
She seems quite literal about the nature of the evil involved. She argues these aren't just corrupt bureaucrats, but people involved in trafficking and ritualistic behavior.
Wow.
And to prove that these things, these coincidences, are actually patterns, she brings up a historical case that stopped me in my tracks.
The case of Jessica Gowie.
Yeah, I remember reading this in the notes. This is the timeline from 2012.
Right. It is a tragic and, I mean, statistically bizarre story. Jessica Gowie was in the Eaton Center Mall in Toronto in 2012. She had a bad feeling, a strange sense of unease, and left the food court. Minutes later, a shooting occurred there. She survived.
Okay, scary, but people survive shootings. It happens.
But then, just a few weeks later, she went to the movies in Aurora, Colorado.
Oh, The Dark Knight Rises premiere.
And she was killed in that mass shooting.
2 mass shootings in 2 different countries in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
The odds of that are astronomical.
It is statistically wild. But the source connects it back to the current investigation by pointing out where Jessica Gowie lived.
Okay.
She had lived in New Braunfels, Texas.
New Braunfels. Why does that sound familiar in this context?
Because, allegedly, that is where Dan Flood, Charlie Kirk's security chief, is from.
No way.
And the man Jessica Gowie was with in the theater, the friend who survived, had flown in specifically from New Braunfels to see her.
So Owens and Coleman are using this to argue that these locations, New Braunfels, Aurora, Orem, aren't random. They are suggesting that these people are military targets or assets being moved around a board.
So the argument is, when you see the same specific geographic nodes popping up in different random tragedies, you stop believing they are random.
Exactly. They believe the truth has been decentralized because the official investigations, police, FBI, are compromised by this same network.
So for them, finding a connection between New Braunfels and Dan Flood isn't trivia. It's evidence of the web.
It's terrifying to think about, but let's bring it back to the human dynamics at TPUSA because there is a very personal battle happening over who gets to sit in the CEO chair.
Right, the dynasty play.
The narrative being pushed by the current leadership is that Charlie explicitly wanted his wife, Erica, to take over.
But Owens is not buying it. She is incredibly skeptical of this takeover narrative, and she breaks it down with 2 very distinct arguments. One forensic, one psychological.
Let's start with the forensic one, the evidence.
TPUSA apparently released an audio clip of Charlie saying he wanted Erica to succeed him. This was recorded at a donor retreat in Aspen in August, just a month before he died.
So Owens asks the obvious question. This is a high-dollar donor retreat. There are cameras everywhere. If you have the audio, where's the video?
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
In 2026, especially with AI being what it is, audio is. Well, it's malleable. Video is harder to fake convincingly.
And if you're at a donor retreat, you are filming everything for promotional material.
Exactly. The absence of video makes her suspicious. But her second argument is the one that I think resonates more with her audience. It's about Charlie's character. She argues that Charlie Kirk held a very traditional, almost fundamentalist view of the family. He believed that mothers with young children should be with the children, not working corporate jobs.
So asking her to take a job that requires traveling 300 days a year.
It completely contradicts his public philosophy. Owens calls it the orphan theory.
The orphan theory. That sounds grim.
It is. Think about it. If Charlie Kirk was worried about being assassinated, which the source claims he was, for months, why would his contingency plan be to ensure that both parents are removed from his children's lives?
One by violence and the other by a grueling CEO schedule.
It doesn't track logically. If you think you might die, you usually want to ensure the surviving parent is more present, not less. You want stability for the kids.
Right. Owens argues that Charlie would never have set his children up to be effectively orphaned. Therefore, the Erica as CEO plan must be a fabrication by the people who want to control the company through her.
And this leads us to the timeline discrepancies regarding the day he died. Because if the succession plan is a lie, what else is a lie?
And the stories about where people were and when. They are messy.
Messy is putting it lightly. This is where the detective work really comes in. Andrew Colvett told Owens a very specific emotional story about that day.
This is the tarmac story.
Yeah, he claimed he flew to the scene and he had so much pent-up anxiety that when the plane landed, he got off, saw Erica on the tarmac, and immediately fell into her arms and sobbed.
It's a very vivid image. It paints them as grieving friends united in tragedy. It humanizes him.
It does. But then Coleman and Owens pulled the flight logs. According to the source, the flight logs show their planes landed an hour apart.
An hour.
They weren't on the tarmac at the same time.
Yeah.
Furthermore, witnesses or logs suggest Colvett actually flew with his wife. So why the story about being alone and anxious?
So the sobbing on the tarmac moment couldn't have happened.
Not the way he described it. And then there's the hospital.
What about it?
The source notes it's incredibly odd that after waiting an hour on the tarmac for Colvett to arrive, they then went to the hospital but entered through different entrances.
Wait, really?
Yes. Erica went through the back, Colvett went through the front. Owens is essentially asking, if you were grieving together, clinging to each other for support, why split up to enter the building?
It implies a stage-managed event, like they were hitting marks for a camera rather than reacting naturally. You go here, I go here, we meet in the middle.
Correct. It's these granular details, timestamps, entrances, missing video that they're using to chip away at the credibility of the witnesses.
But this deep dive isn't just about Charlie Kirk. The source material zooms out to look at the fracturing of the entire conservative media landscape. And there is some serious, ugly bad blood here.
Oh yes, specifically with Dave Rubin.
The fallout with Dave Rubin is personal, and it is intense. Owens details exactly why their friendship ended, and she drops a massive allegation.
We're talking about the grooming accusation.
Yes. And we have to be careful here. This is Owens' account of events as presented in the source.
Right. She claims that she ended the friendship because she felt Rubin and his husband were trying to groom a young, shy employee at the company.
Groom? In what sense?
She alleges they were convincing this 18 or 19-year-old kid who came from a religious background that his shyness was actually repressed homosexuality.
Wow.
She claims they were pushing him to date men, manipulating a vulnerable young person who wasn't actually gay, just shy.
That's a character assassination of the highest order. She's painting them as predators.
She is. And she juxtaposes that moral accusation with a financial one. She brings up Peter Thiel.
The tech billionaire.
Right. Apparently, Rubin borrowed $5 million from Peter Thiel to buy a house. A huge sum. But the story Owens tells is that Rubin complained to her that Thiel was actually charging him interest on the loan.
Wait, he borrowed $5 million and complained about the interest? Most people would just be happy to get the loan at all.
That's the point she's making.
Yeah.
She presents it as Rubin being entitled, but it also serves a bigger narrative purpose. It connects the media figures directly to the billionaire donors.
It shows the strings.
And that segments into the much larger political argument about Donald Trump. This is the Trump has been flipped theory.
Right. The source argues that following the assassination attempt in Butler, PA, back in 2024, Trump's priorities shifted. They claim he is now beholden to what they term Zionist donors.
And they use a really specific example to prove this, Greenland.
Greenland. That sounds random.
It does, right. But follow the money. They connect the push to buy Greenland not to U.S. strategic interests, but to Ronald Lauder.
The president of the World Jewish Congress.
The same. The theory is that Lauder and a group of donors have financial interests tied to Greenland's resources. So when Trump starts talking about buying Greenland, Owens argues he isn't doing it for America. He's doing it for Lauder.
Because he owes them.
Exactly. Owens argues that support for Israel, and specifically the financial interests of these donors, has become a mafia-like requirement in conservative media.
So if you don't toe the line, if you don't support the Greenland purchase or whatever the donor class wants, you are out.
That's the argument. She sees this as the primary cause for the fracturing of the movement. It's no longer America first versus the left. It's the grassroots versus the donors.
It's a bleak view. You have internal purges, compromised leaders, phantom drones, and a movement tearing itself apart over foreign money. It is heavy, dark, conspiracy-laden stuff.
It is. But I have to say, amidst all this talk of assassination and Satanism, there was one moment in the source that was just deeply unintentionally funny.
I know exactly what you were going to say. You were talking about the Joe crash out.
I'm absolutely talking about the Joe crash out. You have Baron Coleman, right? He's this serious investigator. He's talking about military intelligence and murder. And then he just snaps.
He loses it on a random commenter.
A guy named Joe in the chat questions his logic. And Coleman doesn't just ban him or ignore him. He goes on this long, sarcastic academic rant.
He literally tells Joe to go take an Introduction to Logic course. He starts recommending reading material.
Read Irving M. Copey. Go to Stanford Online. It's a specific book, Joe. Read the book.
It's hilarious, but it also highlights the dynamic between the two hosts. Owens calls it the good cop, bad cop routine.
She's the diplomat.
Right. She's the polite face, trying to be reasonable. Coleman is the bad cop who is willing to yell at the audience and tell stupid people to get out.
It adds a very human, volatile element to the broadcast.
It really grounds the whole thing, doesn't it? These aren't polished news anchors reading a teleprompter. These are people under immense pressure, feeling attacked, paranoia running high, and sometimes they just snap at a guy named Joe.
It reminds you that they feel like they are in a war, that volatility is a symptom of the stress they are under. They believe they are fighting for their lives.
So let's try to synthesize this. We've looked at the purge, the military theories, the timeline discrepancies, the political fallout. When you pull back, what is the source really telling us?
The source is painting a portrait of a collapse, not just of a company, but of an era. They are arguing that the conservative movement, as we knew it, is dead. It has been replaced by a fractured landscape warring over money, power, and foreign influence.
And it's not just political disagreement anymore.
No. Looming over all of it is this belief in a spiritual war, a satanic elite that has infiltrated the highest levels. This isn't about tax cuts or borders for them anymore. It's about good versus evil.
And they leave us with a haunting, unanswered question. Owen circles back to it repeatedly.
What did Erica know?
That is the big one.
She points to the 24 to 48 hours before Charlie Kirk's death. There is a mention of a prayer session involving a priest. They were praying specifically about a Jezebel article.
A magazine article.
But the article hadn't been written yet, or at least hadn't been published. The suspicion is that people close to him knew a hit piece or something worse was coming. They knew the walls were closing in and they were trying to pray it away.
And the conclusion they draw about the death itself, it's provocative.
It is the ultimate statement of their investigation. They conclude that the assassination wasn't just a killing to remove a political obstacle.
It was a ritual.
A ritual. A ritualistic act meant to silence dissent and show the public, we can do this to your biggest voice, and you can't stop us.
So for Owens and Coleman, the truth, their investigation, is the only weapon left against a system they believe is completely compromised.
It is a heavy, heavy deep dive today. We've gone from corporate firing squads to military conspiracies to spiritual warfare. Whether you buy every theory or not, it is clear that the tremors from these events are going to be felt for a long time.
Absolutely. And it raises a question for the listener that goes beyond just this one case. In a world of deepfakes, missing video footage, and curated narratives, how do you decide what is true?
That is something to chew on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We will catch you on the next one.